This is an adorable motif with a stack of books and these fall leaves. You can paint them for whatever season you want, but this is a lot of fun, and I'm going to show you how to give the impression and shadows here using watercolor. So get your paints ready and let's get started. I love this cozy stack of books, and we're going to get started painting this by starting with the leaves first so that those layers can start to dry and we can add more layers to them. The way I'm going to do these leaves is with a wet on wet technique, which I'm using this water brush here, and I'm squeezing just a light layer of water into these two sections of the leaves. I'm trying to get to the edge as close as possible. I do have a fall leaf motif. You can search in my YouTube channel or on my website, tamery.com, and just type in fall leaf, and you can see me doing that as a single leaf. And so I'm going to start with this redwood in my, this is foxberry in my woodlands kit. And now I'm going to come in with that red at the edge. And it's nice to get a nice dark color right at the edge here, making sure to deposit a lot of those minerals into that wet area. Don't worry about it being super perfect. We're just getting down that first layer. If you go outside of the lines and you don't like how it looks, then you would just clear your brush, press down with your paper towel very carefully, like you would do this, and pull away. And that way you're not smearing it, and you can just scrub at it a little bit and kind of get more in there. So I've got this wet here, and now I'm going to use out of this one, this hibiscus is from the tropical set, or you can use an orange if you have one in whatever box or paint set that you are using. And I'm kind of tapping that into this. You can make your leaf whatever colors that you would like, and in this one I use daylight and a little bit of this cavern to get a yellow. And now I'm just tapping that yellow inside of where that orange was. And now that that foxberry, or kind of a cranberry red, has kind of dispersed, I'm going to add another little bit of a layer in here on top, and I will come back probably later and add more to that. So now I'm going to go into the next one, and you may want to practice over here. If you've got my Taken paints, you've got a little practice strip there to get your colors ready, and I suggest doing that. You saw on my palette here that I've got my colors kind of prepared, most of the ones I'll be using. I'll show you the reference again. This is what I've already painted, so I've got that in front of me. And if you would like a reference, you can go to tamery.com and look under the book nook, this fall motif, and you can see it there to use that as a picture, a larger picture to look at. Okay, and now I'm just pulling from a couple of these rusty reds and some of these yellows in here, and we will be using a brown if you've got one in your box. This one's called Bear, and although I'm putting this into the wet area, it will disperse, but at least it'll give it a little bit of that aging look to it. So we've got that one started on our first layer. Let's move over here to this one, and I have painted this more of a yellow. Some of these kind of rusty colors here, and start to dab some of that in. Now with my water brush, I'm just watching. Sometimes it'll start to release more water than I may want, so I'm just paying attention to that. Or if you're dipping it in, make sure to wipe it off onto your paper towel so that you don't make a big mess, since this is a little motif. And I want to get up into the edges of these lines. If you go outside the lines and you can't clean it up well, you can always take your pencil and kind of redraw an extra line into your leaf, and that will be fine, because You'll just add something to it and no one will ever know. You might know, but you'll forget because you may enhance it even more. It may end up looking better. Now you can see how this one dried. It all kind of dispersed together, which is great. It's got these nice little crispy watercolor minerals pooling at the edge. And so we can go back into that and sort of deposit carefully. Almost went outside of the lines. A little bit more. Get that fire in there. And whoop, I just saturated. Then I've got this pineapple from the other set, this yellow, to just make it easier than to mix, but you can use whatever you have. In my other leaf video, I had some green in the middle. On this one, I'm not doing that because I really do want it to match with the rest of the colors that I've chosen in the books and things. So if you had green in your books, then that might be a great thing to add. Now I'm going to carefully work on this little kind of like, it's not a pine cone, but this little 3D dried natural element. There, I want to be careful around this leaf, so I'll go back and fill those in later if I need to, just so that I don't let them bleed one into the other. And I'm going to let that set up, and I'll add in some more dimension to that in a minute. So now we can move down to our books. I kind of picked some colors out that I wanted to use for my books that I know will look good together. And so I've got kind of this kind of burnt red here, and not exactly rusty, just a little bit of that kind of orangey yellow brown in here. And the photo of these books showed like a worn book. That's why I have these extra lines here. It's supposed to be kind of vintagey looking, so the books are not perfect, meaning they're not fresh off the press. They've been well loved and passed along over the years. So we're going to get this edge here, and I'm using my brush like a marker. It's a very small, fine tip, so you just want to be careful with that depending on what brush you are using. And now I'm adding another layer. I've left some white of the paper here. I'm adding another layer just so it'll get a couple of layers of pooled minerals. And this book had like kind of a crackly, maybe sort of a leather cover. So I do want to try, no one will know whether it was supposed to be what or not, but I'm going to try to kind of leave a little bit of the white of the paper and dabble in some color, especially initially here, so that I get that. And I can fill it in a minute a little bit more. And then I painted this originally. You can choose what you want to do, if you want your whole book to be blue or not for this. And I put blue across there, you see, and then I'm just dabbing in a little bit more color because as you can see over here, it starts to leave a bit of a texture. And I'll go back and paint the rest of that in a minute. So I'll move up here without getting my hand in what I've painted and begin to paint this leaf in the background, assuming that's pretty dry. And it starts to get hard to tell what's really, oops, I went out of the line, so I'm just going to kind of dab that back and erase it. Working at a weird angle here. Kind of went out of the lines there, but that's okay because it makes sense. And now I'm going to take a little bit of this orange, put that in here. A little bit of brown into that. And while I've got my brown on my brush, I'm going to put a little bit. That one's pretty dark, so I would not typically use that much, but I think I can make it work by moving that pigment around a little bit. Pulling it away and moving it over. Okay. And I don't want to use the same exact color as this leaf because then it'll all start to blend together, especially if you've got this in a frame and you're seeing it from far away. You won't really be able to distinguish, so that's why that's planned to be a little different. And now I'm going to get into this little tiny space up here. To be very careful. Okay, that's got some pop to it. Now we can work in here, and I'm going to take some of this in this woodland set, some sand red. You can make a tan usually by using the brown in your box with possibly a dab of yellow, or if you've got like a white, you can use that. So I'm just kind of, this in the photograph was like white or like actually a tan color. So I'm going to leave a little bit of white of the paper in there just to make sure that it pops enough. Because those colors I think look good together, the orange and blue. And it goes with fall, so if you're doing something a little more springy and you want your leaves to be nice and green, and your books could be kind of green and maybe pink and more spring colors, it's easy enough to turn this fall motif into spring or summer. Okay, and then I have this one actually shown in kind of a tan along this binding here. And I'd wait for that to dry, but those are so close. I'm just going to go ahead and let that happen. And now I'm going to just tap that into a few of these white spaces in here, just to make it look like it's aged and some of the paint is sort of peeling off. And I added a little brown here just as kind of a shadow or depth to it. Instead of using black or gray, I'm using a brown, kind of a gray in here, and I'm only going on the inside there, leaving that edge for right now. Added a little bit of brown. Actually, that works. It's not bleeding yet. Okay, I'll still wait on this because that's still wet. And I'm going to take a little bit of gray and sort of, to come into these books, you want to sort of get the end in a color, but then you just want a few little strokes in there to imply pages. I'll show you on this book, it's a little easier. So first I'm going to put kind of that shadow there, and now come from this edge and come in, come from this edge and go out. And I don't have to follow all of those lines that I have in there, but we're giving an impression of some kind of tan pages are aged. And then I'm going to come in here and kind of dab a little bit of that brown to give a shadow, maybe a little bit more. And you can test it out on your little tester first. And I'm going to kind of box this in, leave a little white of the paper, and you see I'm kind of following in the edges but leaving those white for now. And I go inside of this string. That's a little dark inside there, so I'm moving some of that pigment around. And we carry a lot of the pigment in the tip of our brush, so sometimes we can just deposit that by tapping it. We can see the binding of the book through the string here, so we want to kind of guess, or you can wait until after you've figured that out and painted it. Follow this line here on that jacket, and that goes to there. You might actually start here and go backward, because that way you're not with the fat part of the brush right there. That's kind of a good rule of thumb. So I'm going to tap in a little bit more pigment and do like we did before, where I take a little bit of this sandy color, and you can wait until that's good and dry, or just kind of add that in, see how it's going to spread if it's not dry, but it kind of makes it look aged a little. Now, it is good to think about how you're going to do your stack so that it looks cohesive together. And I'm choosing to do this very light. You could do it very dark, but if you pick a color in this colorway here, it's not going to stand out. So I'm using like a kind of gray, all right, now I had a binding that was a little darker, and I could do that because I don't have things sitting on it. So don't want it to be too brown, because I'm going to do these strings brown. So like I said, it's kind of good to sort of think ahead about how you're designing it. And I do so many of these. One, I do several of them as practice, just to be sure that the lines are right and it's paintable. And I do them. This one's a new one, but I would potentially do this for a class, and I'll do it lots and lots of times. So I love it that I can paint it different every time, and I can still be creative and still create for others without getting too bored. Okay, and if you want texture, you can press your paper towel down and just leave it like that. That gives a nice texture. Let's add more. It's just harder to take it away. So I've got this little label here that I want in sort of a gray-black. I'm going to do the same up here. And I'm not touching the edge, which is fine. I'm leaving the white there as kind of its own line. Let's see if I can get in there without messing it up. Adding some kind of highlights here, or shadows. And there's this little kind of book in here. So I took a darker blue. It's like more of like a little pamphlet or something that was in the photograph, and I liked it, so I'm leaving it, and hopefully that doesn't bleed into there since it's not dry yet. But I like the uniqueness of that look. And I think that really goes nicely with the leaves, but kind of softens it so that, in my case, it's more feminine. So that is a good thing. And obviously, if you were painting this to give as a gift to somebody for their office, and it's a man, and you feel like, let me do less pastel and a dark hunter green and book, maybe some black and brown, really would look nice as well. So this is more of a feminine palette here. Most of this should be pretty dry, and we're going to do this as twine. To me, it could be ribbon. You can choose whatever color you want. So I'm coming in here and, like I said, sort of using that like a marker, and I can leave a little bit of the white of the paper. I'm not feeling like I have to fill in all the lines, and that's going to make it look a little more like twine. If you're making it look like ribbon, then I would fill the lines in as best as possible. That gives you the freedom to kind of take the lines that I've drawn and make it your own. Okay, we are really finishing this up. Now we've got these other pages, so I'm going to put some lines in here, like I said, kind of tapping some color in at the end and at the beginning to kind of look like the fray of pages that aren't exactly lined up with each other. All right, so now we'll just put a few more details into our leaves if you wanted to add any more layers. Just kind of squeeze some water into there to just kind of make it more vibrant as it's soaked in and combined. We can just add a little more. Might be scary at first because it looks so bright, but it'll soak into the paper, into the layers, and look very nice. And those minerals pulling at the edge is a nice look. So don't be, once you get used to watercolor, that's the way it does. Got the white of the paper, still leaving some of it, but adding a little bit of dimension here. And I do want to put a shadow, so I'm going to water down some of my kind of shadowy black and putting that right along the edges of these books. One's kind of hanging off the edge there, so there's no shadow underneath here. But there is kind of a shadow here that would indicate that that book is kind of hanging over. We want to do the same thing on our leaves and a little bit around our string. Getting some black in the middle of the string areas is going to really, or that twine, is really going to make it look like it's dimensional. Now this is hanging, so we don't want to, this is against the book, so the shadow doesn't exactly go the same way underneath here. I don't want an exact line there, so I'm going to put that in. But I wanted it to be darker behind there so that it kind of contrasts those two things, even though it's not exactly a shadow. And I want to put some more pigment in here. It's getting a little bit flat. A sunny day, there's a window, so it's not a lot of shadow here. And I'm going to kind of come along a few of these lines to define the table. It's got an edge here where it's dropping down. You could make it look like it's wood and the table continues to go flat, or you can have it, going perpendicular, if that makes any sense. Okay. So that's the books, and you could go in, I'll just show you in steps. This is kind of a window. It could be like paneling in the background, so you can choose what you'd like to imagine or how much work you want to put into it. So in my reference, well, that's very, very dark. That's why it's good to go over here and test it out first. And since I don't want that, I'm just kind of stamping that away. So don't ever panic. I'm going to go along here and I'm going to make that strong and I'll show you. I'm going to spread this paint off of that line, let it kind of set up first to at least stain the paper. And you can see my hand isn't super steady and I'm okay. It's kind of the sketchiness of the way it was drawn, but you do want to kind of pull lines towards yourself because your hand will be more steady that way. And you can really practice on your little practice sheet here doing lines, and that just keeps you from dipping your hand down as it gets too tired. These were darker than this, so I'm just kind of, well, it's already wet, just sort of adding a little bit of pigment since I didn't get as much. Now for the window part, I'm going to put a wash of water. We have to be very careful around these leaves because they are very saturated with colors. So I'm going to start by kind of putting a wash. You could, because I'm going to use a little bit of blue, I can just add a little pigment so I can see where my water is going. But I don't want a lot of pigment on that because I really want to be able to make it look like a window. You don't even have to go in between. If you don't want to, you can kind of leave a little bit of white of the paper in there because I'm going to just give the impression of glass. So, or the sky outside. So I'm going to go carefully again. I'm turning this around so I can see what I'm doing and have some kind of level of accuracy. Looking through the window, seeing some sky out there. Who knows? You could be on wide open land and there are no trees through this window, and therefore you can either just put like glass in it, and so that's what you'll see over here. And this was like a lacy table cover in the photo, so you can come in and kind of put more of a texture in here, give an impression of a texture. It goes down like so. So now I'm going to do those little textured lines, sort of thinking about it being more vertical. So that's kind of set up a little bit. I gave it a minute to kind of, what I call setup is just kind of dry so that it keeps some of these pigment edges here. And now I'm just taking a clear brush and kind of going over it to just disperse that a little bit so it's not quite so textured, like so. Now I'm going to go back over this book here because I need some definition in the binding here. I might actually take a clear brush and just tap over some of these areas where I've got the white of the paper and it's too much, in my opinion. Define that. You're welcome to skip if you've got that figured out. And let's go across here. It's just those little details that can make a difference. You can feel like doing it, or maybe you don't. And that's just going to be more of a lighter shadow where it goes there. And now we do need to, that's kind of wet, but we do need to go over this book here and put that into place. Can add some things like that, like just a little tap at the corner where your lines meet and you're not doing a whole line. And that starts giving the eye, without thinking, a few little clues as to the depth and dimension. Just hints and not quite so in your face. And for me, this is done. This is frameable. It's really pretty and gives you a lot to do with your creativity because there's just so much in this to get that detail.